Hello, welcome to episode 1, Focus in 3D, Mind, Body, Spirit. In this episode, you'll hear about my personal journey with ADHD, how it's affected my life, both as a child and as an adult, how I became an expert on ADHD from medical professional, clinician, to parent, to ADHD thriving professional. Full transparency here. Although the story does start from kind of a bleak place, I promise there is a happy ending. My goal here is simply to introduce myself to you, get you familiar with my story and my perspective on ADHD, and hopefully to uplift and inspire you if any of this resonates. So the story starts back in 2015 when a light bulb went off, and I finally woke up to the fact that I had been stuck in a cycle of perpetual thoughts that were negative. I was thinking how I'm so unhappy with my life. Something has to change. I don't know who I am anymore or what I want. And I even felt guilt. Am I bad and selfish for wanting more? I felt like I couldn't really see a way out of my day to day. And to be quite honest with you, the weight of the world seemed quite heavy. I had tried and failed many times to reach goals outside of my daily survival routine of live and work life and parenting and being a wife. And I always seemed to fall off track. I felt like I was never able to accomplish anything that was bigger than myself or more meaningful or fulfilling or even more creative than my daily 9 to 5 grind and mommy duties. Now, I am by no means complaining about being a mom or having a 9 to 5. I am very grateful for my career and I love my kids more than anything on this planet. So just want to throw that out there. But even with all the love and appreciation, you can still sometimes find yourself feeling like you're in a rut and like you just want to have a new and creative outlet. And that for me was setting goals outside of myself. Um, Learning to run 5Ks with a girlfriend of mine was one of the goals that I had during that period of time. And eventually I did reach that. Um, but there were still other things too that I wanted to do with my mind, with my energy. So back in 2015, I was 43 years old. I was married at the time and I was mother of, as I mentioned, my 2 kids. My son was 10, my daughter was 8. And I felt like I was stuck working in a medical practice that I had felt passionate about since day one of my then 15-year medical career. But I was starting to feel very burned out and bored, and that I lacked potential for growth. I had no creative outlet. Every day was kind of copy and paste. Every one of my patient encounters seemed to, at that time, um, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I just felt like it was all sucking the life out of me, like it was draining me, like my compassion bucket had dwindled down, and many psychologists and personal development experts call that compassion fatigue. I think that definitely did play a big part in how desperate I started to feel finally in 2015. Um, and if that wasn't bad enough, I really honestly couldn't stand how happy and on the ball my coworkers always seemed to be. In my relationship with my then husband, I felt also very distant, disconnected from him. I felt unseen, unheard, and insignificant. And again, this episode is not about blaming other people. I want to make that clear. A lot of that was because I was not able to see myself as the individual that I once was before. I wasn't able to feel the energy to take a leadership role in my life. And I had kind of let my husband's lead take over every aspect of kind of what I was living. So that was on me. Again, this is not pointing fingers at anyone. I was just at a very immature and dark place. Immature emotionally and in the personal development way, immature. In my parenting, I felt like I was inadequate oftentimes. I felt exhausted and insecure. I was chronically late everywhere I went with my children. I felt scattered and life just felt really chaotic. How do all those other moms manage to get their kids to school on time every day and with a smile? What am I doing wrong? I was constantly feeling embarrassed. What is their secret? Embarrassed because I felt like I was deep down depressed or irritated, and everyone else seemed so happy around me all the time. And truth be told, there was a component of depression that had settled in at that point. So all of the things that I'm describing to you are not necessarily directly a result of my ADHD. My ADHD that I had suffered with all my life indirectly led me to a place of feeling depressed and just irritated. I felt suffocated, like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was obligated by everything outside of me, but I didn't know what I wanted inside because I had really let go of all of my own decision-making power. And that damaged me quite a bit at the time. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't speak. I felt lost and confused. Um, and I questioned why hadn't the last 15 years of therapy done its magic and changed my life. After all, I'd been going to therapy since the year before I had gotten married, and I continued it off and on for several years, alone with my husband, alone again with my husband again. Finally, out of love and respect, I have to believe, a dear friend said to me, and granted, this question came from a place that she was probably exhausted from my same old rants about my misery that probably seemed pretty constant to her. And she said, Veronica, what you need is a life coach. A life coach? What the heck is a life coach? That sounds gimmicky. If all the therapy in the world hadn't changed my life at that point, what more could a life coach possibly do with me? So, fast forward a year, during 2016, several life changing events happened. My husband and I did decide to get divorced and we separated. I had to find a place to live on my own, and we were renting the house where we had been living at the time. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to afford that rent on my own. I had only lived on my own actually for a short period of time after I had graduated from PA school in 2000. And even that move had been with the input and the help of my now ex husband. I had never managed a household budget on my own. My husband had done all of that. I had never set up utility accounts on my own. I hadn't even planned meals or grocery shopped on my own. Embarrassed to say, my ex took care of that too. I had never made serious big decisions on my own, like what TV should I buy? Where do I take my car if it breaks down? What friend can I call on for help? Because even though I had lived in the same city for so long, I had allowed myself to exist through the presence of my ex. You see, when you have ADHD, it's very common that you put off decision making. Decision making often feels hard and overwhelming. And that had been true for me pretty much all my life, I have to say. I had made decisions about my education and my career, but that's really as far as I got in terms of independent decision making, at least about big things. Um, all of my friends, like I said, were people who I'd met through my husband's circle of either family or friends that he had developed from growing up here in the city where we currently live. My mechanic, our cleaning lady, family get togethers, they were all from his circles. And my family at the time lived about 1,200 miles away in a different state. So I was on my own at this point. My family was there for me. I do want to interject this for a moment, and they did support everything that I was going through. But at the time, my father had been recently diagnosed with cancer, and my mom was very active in all of his care, hands-on from day one. So even though my family loved me and supported me, they did not abandon me, but they weren't able to be with me physically through the transition of what I was going through. So, yes, you guessed it. I looked up life coach. I was like, what can a life coach do? How do they differ from psychologists or therapists? And I ended up finding several wonderful podcasts. I started listening to one of my favorite life coaches to this day. Her name is Tanya Lee. If you don't follow her, I do recommend that. At the time, she was doing a podcast called French Kiss Life. And I thought the title of her podcast was a bit racy for me at the time because I was so hidden and um, like paralyzed a lot. I couldn't enjoy life. And I thought the title of her podcast was like kind of racy and fun. But she talked about how important it is to allow yourself to have pleasure in life, allow yourself to feel luxurious, even without having to spend a lot of money necessarily. But Tanya Lee really helped me find my self-esteem again. She really helped me find my identity again. She helped ask me tough questions that really helped me find who I was and who I wanted to be. Um, she now has an amazing coaching program called the School of Self-Image, or SOSI. So if self-image is an area that you feel like you need to work on, which many of us with ADHD for a lifetime do have beat up self-images, I do recommend you look into her, listen to her podcast. She was one of the ones that laid the foundation for me. I joined her group coaching program. I listened to every podcast she did. I did the homework. I read all the newsletters, and I started finding other similar life coaches, but in slightly different niches that also spoke to me and also inspired me. I was very inspired by Brendan Bouchard. He's a major productivity coach because I felt like I was always struggling to move forward with hard and big things. Um, just to tell you a little bit about um, before that, like I was so stuck in not being able to be productive. I was the type of kid who, when we had required reading in school, I would never read the novel from cover to cover. I always had to use what was then called Cliff's Notes. Does that age me a bit? Probably, but that's okay. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off track. Um, I read several great books on personal development and life coaching, and I even, through that process, found the confidence and the courage to get on dating apps to start learning more about what I did and did not want out of life and relationships. I learned simple, actionable steps I could take to improve my productivity. I developed healthy habits for my mental and emotional health, things that I had no idea would impact me so much, like journaling in the morning or meditating in the morning. I learned that I could build my version of happiness and success. Um, I took a deep dive into self improvement and personal development altogether, and I absolutely loved it. I began to thrive in my new life. Through coaching, I learned actionable and practical advice in the form of simple and doable steps that I could take to make very small changes. This helped me really to build my decision making muscle and realize who I was while growing into the person that I really wanted to be. Life coaching turned out to be no short of transformational. I learned how to make decisions in the faces of fear and uncertainty. I got to know myself. I learned about what I like, what I don't like, what my tastes are. I started practicing so much self awareness, not just on a superficial level, that's where it started, but as it grew, it became deeper and deeper to the point where I really began to understand not only my habits on the outside, but what wired my brain on the inside and how I could use how my brain works naturally to be able to improve a lot of areas of my life. I in all began to create my own sense of calm and happy. So I had gone from living a life of chaos and uncertainty and fogginess to being clear, calm, and happy. I can't say that enough because that was life changing, transformational, and it continues to carry me into the next chapter of my life. I began setting intentions and showing up for myself by following through on my intentions. That was a big step to take, following through on my intentions, because I feel like a lot of us with ADHD, we're quite intelligent people. And so it's easy for us to set a goal or set an intention for ourselves, like to state it or write it down. But we often forget. We forget what our intentions are because we get so easily distracted by life in general. I mean, life is distracting. We have a lot of things we do in one day. I also learned through coaching to detach from outcomes so that I could live more freely and happily in the present moment and not be so judgmental if my outcomes didn't uh, meet up to the standard that I thought they should initially when I would set an intention or a goal. And that's really helped me a lot as well to live happily and more freely. I began to forgive. I began to heal. I began to love, even myself, which was the hardest part. I slowly became more present and a loving parent. I became more personable and interactive at work with my colleagues, and people noticed that I carried myself differently. Life coaching indeed had helped me change my life, no doubt. Through the self development phase of my life, I had come to learn that autonomy, or the freedom to call the shots of my own life, was the only thing I valued more. Was the one thing I valued more than all other values except for love. Fast forward to the COVID pandemic of 2020, the world shut down, right? Our healthcare jobs shifted from in person interactions to practicing telehealth from the coziness and intimacy of our home offices. I didn't have to commute. I didn't have to see or hear anyone outside of my beloved family circle for a while. And I've got to tell you, for the first few weeks of that, it was a very welcome change. Through telehealth, I was able to meet my patients in their own homes. I could see their backgrounds through the cameras. I was literally a face in their own living rooms now. So I may not have been able to touch them, but I was transported into their space and into their families. And telehealth created a different level of honesty and vulnerability that had not existed before. Furthermore, I only had to interact with my supervising physician once or twice a day to review cases. Autonomy. Well, kind of. As many people did during that time, I shifted. Something in my brain started churning out ideas. A creative energy was sparked and lit up inside of me. What could I do with my knowledge, clinical, personal, and life experience that would allow me to serve others, but in a capacity where I wasn't dependent on a boss, supervising physician, or medical corporate institution? At that point in my career, I had reached 8 years of experience in ADHD clinical expertise. I had been part of the first ADHD clinic at the hospital where I was affiliated, and I had been counseling, diagnosing, and treating ADHD for 18 years. Now, a glimpse into my personal life. As I told you, I'm the mother of two beautiful, rambunctious, intelligent ADHD teens who, being boy and girl, display it very differently. And through my career of learning and understanding what diagnostic criteria are for ADHD and how it affects students and adults, I had realized that I had been the high functioning ADHD patient woman all my life, although I had never been formally diagnosed. You see, as I told you before, I never finished required reading for school. I could not write long papers until the very night before they were due. I crammed for semester end finals the night before tests. And in perfect procrastinator ADHD fashion, um, I just would leave everything to the very last minute because I could not get my brain to focus and pay attention long enough to do the really hard things for extended periods of time. I guess I had always been able to compensate with my level of intelligence and my defense mechanisms because, see, when you have ADHD, you do develop defense mechanisms over time. In some areas of your life, you may find that you become a little OCD, and that certainly was true for me. In fact, I used my OCD kind of as a form of procrastination. See, when I'm supposed to be like sitting down and writing a paper or reading a book that's required reading, or studying something, I would much rather chime in and get up and start obsessively compulsively cleaning my house to the point of insanity. But at the end of the day, let's be a little bit more reasonable. ADHD affected me because it was the very reason I was never able to sit and study for standardized tests very long. It's why I didn't get into medical school. I could never make myself practice and memorize all the things I needed to succeed at the MCAT. I could never balance a budget in real life, fast forward to adulthood. I couldn't track things like spending, or when it came to my health, calories, or exercise and sleep. And God forbid you make me look at a spreadsheet. Oh, that is ADHD hell. Well, now you get what my perspective and experience has been. And with all that life experience of learning, diagnosing, prescribing, counseling, and parenting, and just sheer living, I decided to put my skills to use by becoming an ADHD life coach. In December of 2021, I graduated from the Jay Shetty Coaching School. In 2022, I opened Focused Mind Coaching. My clients are not all formally diagnosed with ADHD, but they do all have the desire and need for better mental focus in all areas of their lives, from their work to their parenting, to just day to day living and establishing healthy habits for themselves. My clients are professionals from all walks of life. Some are parents of kids with ADHD, teachers, business owners, attorneys, medical professionals. Some are adult professional students from the fields of law, medicine, business, and healthcare. One thing all my clients have in common is that they are struggling to stay focused on the actions that will get them closer to realizing their goals. With Focused Mind Coaching, my clients gain clarity, confidence, peace of mind, and reach a new level of calm in their lives. And that comes from improved whole brain and body health. In one-to-one coaching sessions, my clients feel heard. They're able to create unique plans of actions that fit their lives. They also create healthier lifestyles and gain a layer of accountability by staying committed to our one-to-one coaching sessions together. That's Focused Mind Coaching. It's 100% client customized, focusing on what's best for each individual. Well, guys, that's my story. Thank you for staying to the end. I hope that this episode was helpful to you and that maybe it helped you see some things in yourself that you hadn't previously recognized. And I hope that it helped you to understand the other things that ADHD affects, such as deeper mood issues, depression sometimes, feelings of anxiety, a loss of self. Um, but know that there's help for that. You've just got to hang around the right people. That's all for episode 1. Please join us for episode 2 of Focus in 3D, Focus Resilience. What it is, why you need it, and how you can get more of it. Thank you.